All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Stephanie Howe. I'm the client's rights advocate for North Los Angeles Regional Center. My pronouns are she, her. I started working there in August, so I've been here for about half a year. Today I'm here to give you guys a presentation on IHSS, how to apply for it, who's eligible, how to apply, and, if you get a decision you don't like, how do you appeal that? So those are sort of the three main topics that we're going to talk about. And if you have questions, feel free to just type them in the chat, and I'll try to, answer them when it makes sense, during the presentation. But we're also going to take questions at the end. So, you can also save your questions for the end if you wish. But we're going to talk about what IHSS is, which is, what kind of services you can get, who's eligible, what kind of services they'll pay for, who can be an IHSS provider, and the IHSS appeals process. And, if I'm going too fast or you want me to slow down, please just, let me know. So I know I have a tendency to talk a little bit quickly, so I'll try to do my best to keep it slowed down. But, sometimes I do accidentally speed up. So just let me know if anyone, if they're having problems keeping up with me, just let me know. Okay. So what is IHSS? IHSS, it's a Medi-Cal funded program that helps people, including children with disabilities, remain in their own home. So it provides basic services for people who can't perform certain tasks by themselves. It can include paramedical services, which are authorized by medical professionals. So that would be, if you need some kind of special medical care at home, that's what a paramedical service would be. And if it can provide protective supervision for people that, you have intellectual disabilities or disabilities that make it unsafe for them to be unsupervised. IHSS is administered by each county under the direction of the California Department of Social Services. And it's an alternative to out-of-home placement. So who's eligible for IHSS? So any California resident is eligible for IHSS if they're blind, disabled, or 65 years of age or older. They have a supplemental security income from Social Security, or they're Medi-Cal eligible. So basically, you can only get IHSS if you have Medi-Cal. And if they're living in a home or apartment, so you can't, not in an assisted living space or a group home or a hospital. So you need to be living in your own home, and they can't live safely at home without help. I see a question was asking if we can get the slides after the presentation. I can definitely send the email to Sandra, and, Sandra can, I don't know how, if she can figure out a way to get it to all of you guys, but, I'll definitely send it to her so you guys can distribute it. Yeah, for sure. So for children, IHSS takes into account the needs that they have, but they only provide services for the needs that exceed what a child of the same age would need that doesn't have disabilities. So, if you have a 1-year-old child with a disability, they probably aren't going to provide services for changing their diapers and things like that, because that's something that you would normally do for a 1-year-old child. So they only provide services that, would typically be beyond what a child would normally need, a typically developing child would need. But, if they do, they do find that their needs do exceed that of a typically developing child, then you'd be able to receive things like personal care service, paramedical services if the doctor prescribes them, protective supervision, and assistance to taking them to places like their doctor's appointments or school and things like that. So what kind of services does IHSS pay for? So there's a few different service categories that the services that IHSS provides fall into. So the service categories, they're domestic services. So this is things like, vacuuming and cleaning up the house and things like that. But, I think it's only adults that are allowed to have domestic services, because for children, it's expected that the parents are, providing some of that service for their kids. Personal care services, related services, just sort of a catch-all area, and then accompaniment. So, having people go with you to the doctor or to school. Paramedical services, which are services, they provide medical, like you need medical training to administer. Time limited services and protective supervision. And we're going to talk about, these categories a little bit more in depth. Yeah, so domestic services includes things like housework, sweeping, vacuuming, taking out the trash, wheelchair cleaning and battery charging, and changing bed sheets. So it's sort of, your daily household chores. And again, usually only adults are able to get this kind of service because it's sort of expected that parents are helping kids out, even typically developing children, when they're growing up. So, they don't really, it's difficult to get this for children. Related services are things like meal prep and, cleanup of the kitchen, laundry, going grocery shopping, or sort of other shopping errands like picking up prescriptions or buying clothes or toiletries and sort of other necessities for your house. Oops. Personal care services includes things like feeding, bathing, grooming, bowel and bladder care, dressing, like getting your kid dressed or moving them from like the bed to a chair if they need help with their mobility, oral hygiene, if they need help walking around or need help with a prosthetic, putting it on, or, making sure that it's like attached properly and things like that. And also help with, taking medication and, making sure that you take your medication on time. So time limited services, these are sort of like periodic services that you need like every once in a while, but not like every day. So, things like a deep clean of your house, or, raking the leaves out of your yard, or, shoveling snow and ice, although I don't think California gets much snow or ice. And, you can even get some services, which is like teaching and demonstration, where you'd have basically someone that comes to your house to sort of help you and teach you how to do these things on your own. But, you can't get this for every service. It's limited to things like housework, meal prep, laundry, some personal care tasks like bathing, feeding, and dressing, and yard work. And you typically can only get the training for, 3 months maximum before, that service would sort of terminate. So the next category is accompaniment, which is, transportation to and from medical appointments, and, wait time as well, if there's a wait time at the doctor's office. So the transportation to and from places where you get alternative services to IHSS, which would be things like day programs or, resource centers, or, if, any place that you sort of need to go that's related to, obtaining services related to your disability. This is like what a company would require, like if you needed to go to the regional center for, your IPP meeting, probably, IHSS, a company would cover that as well. So for accompaniment for children, there's special requirements for medical accompaniment, because it's, as I said before, for children, for minors, you have to show that the child has a need beyond sort of just like a typical child of the same age. And it's generally expected that a parent would go to their child's doctor's appointments with them if they're, very young. So if, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get IHSS services to take your 4-year-old kid to the doctor, because most people expect that parents would take their 4-year-old to the doctor anyway, even if they were sort of typically developing. Medical accompaniment specifically can only be authorized if the child has extraordinary need and the appointment is for a specialist, and the child has a need for an authorized IHSS task to be performed during the travel or to and from the appointment. So this would be, if your child had perhaps, like a feeding tube or something that had to stay in all the time, and when you're taking them to the doctor, you need someone else there to also be managing that piece of their medical equipment while you're accompanying them to the doctor. So it's an additional person that has to accompany them to the appointment, because by yourself, you aren't able to administer, like take care of all the tasks while you're transporting them and accompanying them to a different location. And that link is a link to a publication that Disability Rights California has created that describes this sort of in more detail. Again, I'm going to give the PowerPoint to Sandra so she can get it to all of you guys. So you have, the links and stuff that are in the PowerPoint for your, your access later. So, the next category of services is paramedical services, which are services that are prescribed by a doctor for someone's health, and it requires some kind of special training and judgment to perform. So it would include services that are ordered by a licensed healthcare professional who's authorized to do so, which persons could provide for themselves, but for their functional limitation. So, for instance, if someone's diabetic and, they aren't able to administer their insulin because of their, developmental disability, then you might be, given paramedical services from IHSS where you have someone that's specifically like able to provide that service for you, and you'd have certain hours, every day for that service. So paramedical services have to be ordered by a licensed medical professional. So they basically have to be prescribed by your doctor. The different things that are examples of paramedical services are things like administering medication or, giving injections, or, range of motion exercises, sort of like physical therapy, or, taking care of sores or wounds, catheter insertion, bowel, if there's some program help that you need with your bowel movements, things like enemas and insertions of suppositories, tube feeding, and trash care and suctioning. So like these kinds of things are, paramedical services that you can receive if, your doctor does give you sort of a signed prescription for these things. You can receive these from IHSS, and that's basically, there'll be, someone will help you administer these services, or if, if you're the IHSS provider, you'd be paid by the county to, do these services for your kid. So to obtain the paramedical service, you have to show that the person with a disability can't perform this service at all by themselves, and it's necessary to maintain their health. And the service requires some kind of training and judgment to perform. So, like things like, giving injections or, inserting some kind of medical device, you wouldn't want just like anyone that doesn't have any experience with that to, be able to do that. So it's a paramedical service is one that requires someone to have specific training on, that medical issue or service in order to be able to perform it. So if you are going to apply for paramedical services, you should make sure that your doctor, when you give the form, so there's some forms that you have to fill out to get paramedical services. I think it was listed. It's the SOC 321. And, you want to make sure that you give your doctor plenty of time to fill it out before your application. So, they can, put all the records together properly. And you want to make sure that your doctor, when they are prescribing sort of like the amount of time, that they include all the time, including like preparation, because, a lot of times the doctors, they don't like prepare the needles and things. They just sort of do that part and then leave. And then it's the nurses that clean it up. So you want to make sure that the doctor includes that cleanup and prep time, that they have other people sort of helping them, and not just the time that they are doing the task. And you want to contact your doctor directly and explain what you need. You don't sort of let the county take over. The county always wants to try to limit as much service as possible because it costs them money. And, it's better to have your child see a specialist if there's a specific medical need that they have. But, if you don't have anyone else, your primary care physician definitely works. And, if they have a lot of experience with your kid, they've known them for several years, they're definitely a good person to go to for, filling out the form. Okay, so next, and I think this is probably a pretty hot topic, is protective supervision. So this is a special service that you can get from IHSS, and it's for people who have a mental illness or mental impairment, who are non-self-directing, and they require 24-hour supervision to, keep them safe. basically. Impairment means a functional limitation in three of these three areas. So it's memory, like forgetting things, people, places, how to get home. Then there's orientation, which is sort of awareness of time, place, self, and others. So if someone wanders off a lot, or they can't identify their family or their friends, and they don't really understand like what time it is, that would indicate that they have some limitations in orientation. And the final category that they use to evaluate protective supervision is judgment, which is making decisions without regard for safety. So if someone isn't really able to recognize and assess danger. So one example that I've seen is a kid that lacks judgment, like has a limitation in judgment. He maybe doesn't understand that hot water, the difference sort of between hot water and cold water, and he might try to put his hand in like a boiling pot of water. Like he doesn't realize that that's dangerous. So that would sort of show some kind of limitation in his ability to judge sort of the danger of what's happening. And so the best cases for supervision, you'll see like functional limitations in all three of these categories. There is a special form that your doctor will fill out, and when you are applying for protective supervision, where your doctor sort of assesses all three of those areas. So here's some examples of behaviors that might warrant protective supervision. So if someone wanders from their home a lot and they just get lost and they don't know where they are, or they often try to eat non-food items, or they never check the street for cars when they're walking outside, or they attempt tasks that could hurt them, like trying to move furniture or heavy objects when they're not strong enough, or if they're small and they're trying to climb up on the counter, and if they fall, they could hurt themselves, if they sort of don't recognize that danger and they're still trying to attempt the task. Things like turning off the stove and then never turning it off, and hurt, like self-biting or scratching, and sort of lack of stranger danger awareness. So you can kind of see how some of these examples sort of show limitations in the different areas like orientation or judgment or memory. So when is protective supervision not available? It's not available like for friendly visiting or social activities. And it's not available when the need is caused by a medical condition and the form of supervision required is medical. So this example is the recipient has diabetes and needs supervision in case they become hypoglycemic, like in case their blood sugar levels drop. So they, you can't get 24-hour supervision to make sure like you don't faint because you had low blood sugar, because that's a medical issue. And so so I guess another example would be, if someone had epilepsy, they wouldn't be able to obtain protective supervision to ensure someone, to ensure that, they didn't have a seizure, because that's a medical condition. You can get other kinds of supervision that would sort of do the same thing, but that itself is not something that would make you eligible for protective supervision. So that's, I guess the next one is anticipation of a medical emergency. Yeah, so the example is if someone has sort of like congestive heart failure and they need someone there in case they, have a heart attack. You can't have protective supervision there to just make sure, you aren't having a heart attack all the time. That's a medical condition that wouldn't be eligible for protective supervision, but you might, be eligible for some other kind of supervision that would do something similar, but it wouldn't be eligible for protective supervision, because protective supervision is specifically for, people who don't have the ability to sort of make sure that they stay safe. You also can't get protective supervision to stop antisocial or aggressive behavior. So this is one that gets kind of difficult sometimes, because there's a lot of times where kids if they might engage in like self-harming behavior, like hitting themselves, or when they get frustrated, and that's like obviously it's an issue with judgment. They're not seeing that that's dangerous for them, but it's also can be seen as sort of antisocial or aggressive behavior. So sometimes it can be difficult to get protective supervision for those kinds of sort of self-harming activities. There are arguments you can make to say that it should get protective supervision, but that's a lot hard. It's just like a trickier case, to get protective supervision for. And then, you can't get protective supervision to guard against deliberate self-destructive behavior. So when someone knowingly and intentionally tries to harm themselves. So, can children get protective supervision? They definitely can get protective supervision, but, again, as it is for children, as we've been saying, you need to show that the child needs supervision due to their disability, and it needs to be more supervision than other children of the same age would need. So, if you have a 2-year-old child and they engage in some dangerous behaviors, like maybe they just wander off all the time, or they try to eat non-food items, typically those would be activities that would qualify you for protective supervision. But if the child is 2 years old, most people expect that parents would be supervising them most of the time anyway. So it would be somewhat difficult to get, it's difficult to show that, they sort of need more supervision than a typical 2-year-old, since, people expect that 2-year-olds are supervised almost all the time just because they're so young. So, it definitely gets easier to obtain protective supervision as the kids get older, because they need less. It's expected that parents are supervising them less, but, it's not impossible to get protective supervision for young children. It's just much more difficult. So here's the technical requirements that you need when you're applying for protective supervision. So you're going to need to fill out the SOC 821 form. So that's the form I was talking about before, where your doctor will fill out the sections for memory, orientation, and judgment. And he gives us, your doctor will give a score for each of those areas. The form by itself isn't enough to establish eligibility, but you have to have this form. And the other form that you need to fill out is the SOC 825, which is filled out by the recipients, or the person who's applying their service provider or their primary contact. So typically, if it's for a child, it will be their parent, which sort of just says what they need 24 hours, what are the things that they need in a 24-hour day, what are the services. So these are optional things that you can have to apply when you're applying for protective supervision, but our office, we recommend them. We highly recommend them because the more evidence that you can give to the state of California that your kid needs 24-hour supervision, the better your case is going to be, and the more likely you are to be granted protective supervision. So one of the things that we recommend that clients do is create what we call a hazard or injury log. So basically, every single time your kid does something that is dangerous and you stop them or you intervene, you should write that down. You should be at 8:30 a.m. I stopped Tommy from putting a knife in his mouth. And then at 9 o'clock, I stopped Tommy from climbing on the chair and falling off and hurting himself. So, sort of the court can see every day sort of how much time you're actually spending watching your kid to make sure that they don't get hurt, right? So that's really powerful evidence that you can use when you're applying for protective supervision to show that, your child really does need someone that can help watch them 24 hours a day to make sure that they're safe. And the other thing that we, you can submit as evidence that we recommend is letters from sort of maybe school teachers or, a therapist or a behaviorist that works with your kid a lot, that can sort of describe your child's limitations in memory, orientation, and judgment, and sort of how those limitations affect their actual behavior. Because, just having more evidence of sort of what the disability looks like in real life, in reality, how it's affecting what they do and how that means that you have to watch them. Anything that you can provide that sort of shows that as evidence is going to be really helpful when you're applying for protective supervision, and example, if the letters can include examples of, unsafe behaviors that they've done, maybe if they went on a school field trip and, they kind of ran away and then the teachers had to go look for them, that would be an example you would want the teacher to put into the letter, right? So you can sort of, so the court can see sort of what your kid is doing and why they need the protective supervision. So this is just more in depth on the 821 form, which is the one that the doctor fills out. So basically they're gonna, rank your kid on the memory, orientation, and judgment, the functional impairments. And so there's 3 tiers. It's no deficit, moderate or intermittent deficit, and severe memory deficit. And then, that they just do those 3 categories for every for the 3 memory, orientation, and judgment. And okay, so the next topic is, when can a parent be paid as an IHSS provider? So a parent can be paid as an IHSS provider if the parent left full-time employment, or they're not able to get a full-time job because there's no other suitable providers that are available. And if the parent doesn't perform this supportive service, then their kid might not get the necessary care that they need. So basically, if you had to leave your job in order to take care of your kid, or if you can't get a job because you have to spend so much time taking care of your kid, you probably qualify to be an IHSS provider. But all IHSS providers have to be legally able to work in the United States. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like, you can't be an IHSS provider if you're not legally allowed to work in the US. So what if one parent works and one has to stay at home to take care of the child or the children? The at-home parent can be the IHSS provider as long as certain conditions are met. And counties should not be using the fact that a parent has never worked outside the home to deny a parent's eligibility as a provider. But basically, I guess if the parent wants to be a provider, they have to have the ability to get a full-time job. But just because you've never had one doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to do that. So if the county is saying, well, you've never had a full-time job before, so you wouldn't qualify, just because you didn't work outside the home because you needed to take care of your kids, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't qualify as an IHSS provider. So what happens if neither parent is able to be the provider? So in certain cases, non-parents can provide IHSS for children. So a non-parent can provide IHSS services if neither parent is able and available to provide services due to like their job or school or some kind of training that they have to go to, or the parents have some kind of disability that prevents them from properly performing the service. If there's some kind of ongoing medical treatment, or because the parent needs to do things like shopping or taking care of the other kids, or searching for a job, or other basically sort of like essential like functions that parents need to be doing for the family, that would just make it really difficult for them to also at the same time be providing these services for their kids. Excuse me. I was just also going to say just briefly that it's common for the paramedical services for that to be a non-parent provider, because a lot of the paramedical services do require special sort of medical training. But it's also possible for parents, if they really want to do it themselves, to try to get that training to do the paramedical service so that they can do that for their kid. But a lot of times people sort of have nurses that might come every once in a while to perform that paramedical service for the recipient. So what happens if there are multiple children? So can both parents be providers, and how are the hours divided? So, if both parents can show that neither of them can work because they have to be taking care of their kids and there's no adequate other person that could be the provider, then both parents can be IHSS providers for their kids. If there's multiple people in the house who need IHSS, some of the IHSS services might sort of be combined between them. So for instance, if we have 2 people in the household that need IHSS service and they both get time for laundry, you wouldn't their laundry time would sort of be, we say it's called prorated, but basically their time gets combined, because you wouldn't sort of, it's just like not efficient for them to have to do their laundry separately. Like you would just combine, like you would do everyone's laundry at once, right? So you would sort of actually get, each person would still get like an amount of time for laundry, but like together it wouldn't be as much as if they lived in separate households, because it's something that can sort of be combined together. So the same thing with cleaning the house. So if they live separately, they might each get an hour, but if they live together, then maybe they only get like an hour and in 15 minutes, because they're cleaning the same, the providers would be cleaning the same space. So if you have 2 recipients in like the same house, some of the services They might be combined like that so that you'd get less time than if each person lived in a separate household. Okay, so what happens if you apply for IHSS and you get this letter from them and it says that you were denied, or it gives you hours, but you don't think that there are enough hours for what you or your kid needs. So then you would want to file what's called an appeal. So after your application, you get a letter that's called the notice of action. So the letter is going to tell you, it tells you, if you were approved or denied, what services you get and like for how many hours. And if it's like a reassessment, it will tell you what are the changes to the existing services that are now going to occur. So, if you disagree with the notice of action, you can appeal. So there's a couple timelines that are really important to remember when you want to appeal your IHSS notice of action. So the first one is that if you want to preserve, so let's say that you had IHS, like you got 100 hours of IHSS service, and then you got a letter that said that they're reducing your hours to 50 hours. If you want to keep your old time during the appeal process, you need to file your appeal within 10 days of the date on the notice, or like the day that you receive your letter. So, and you need to request what's called aid paid pending. So if you appeal within 10 days and you request aid paid pending, then during the entire appeal process, you will still get the old amount of hours that you were getting before the notice was given to you. So you'd still be able to get 100 hours while you're going through the appeal process. If you don't appeal within 10 days, you can still appeal, but you won't get your old amount of hours. Like when the effective date was supposed to happen, you'll start getting 50 hours instead of 100. So, it's really important if you get an IHSS notice of action, if you don't know what to do, talk to your regional center's Office of Client Right Advocacy, your client's rights advocate. For anyone that's at North Los Angeles Regional Center, that's me. Just contact me right away so we can, try to get your appeal filed as soon as possible to make sure that we can maintain, your old level of service if they're decreasing your hours. So, trying to just get that done as soon as possible is just really important if you want to preserve, your old amount of hours after they gave you a notice that says they're reducing it. But, if you don't appeal within 10 days, you can still appeal, as long as you follow your appeal within 90 days, you can still appeal. You just won't get to save sort of your old plan. Your old plan will go away and you have to use the new one until the appeal is finished. So there's an appeal form that comes in every single notice of action at the back. And it's like this little form with a bunch of boxes. And, if you call us, we can help you fill it out with the appropriate language. But, you can appeal by, filling that form out by hand and mailing it to the address, or you can call them at this number on the slide, or you can also go to this website and there is an online form to file an appeal. So there's 3 different ways that you can file the appeal, but it's just important to remember 10 days after you get the letter if you want to preserve your old amount of hours. So what's sort of the timelines after you file the appeal? So you're going to get what's called a notice of hearing at least 10 days before your hearing occurs. They don't really tell you how long it takes to schedule a hearing. It's not uncommon for it to be a few months out from when you filed your appeal, but you're going to get a notice 10 days, at least 10 days before the hearing is supposed to happen. You're supposed to get a notice that tells you when it's going to occur. And then 2 days before the hearing, the county is required to submit their position statement, which is a document that they write that says why they did what they did to your hours. And then, after the hearing occurs, you will get a decision within 90 days. And after you get the decision, if you don't agree with the decision, you can request for a rehearing within 30 days of getting that decision. And then if you really, really don't agree, even after the rehearing, you can appeal to the Superior Court, and you have to do that within 1 year from the date of the decision of, I think it's the rehearing. But generally, I guess I don't want to say that generally people don't go all the way to Superior Court. We don't deal with cases typically that go that far up the chain. We will, if you call us, we'll do our best to help you resolve the issue as soon as possible, which usually means not going all the way to the Superior Court. So, how can OCRA help, and what kind of assistance do we provide? So, as I said, OCRA, we provide free legal services to consumers of the regional centers for legal issues that are related to their disabilities, which would include IHSS. And, each regional center is served by a different client's rights advocate. And for those of you who are part of the North Los Angeles Regional Center, I am the client's rights advocate for that regional center, and you can find my phone number here on the slide. And again, I'm going to give the PowerPoint to Sandra after the presentation, so you guys can see all the slides later. And so, what assistance specifically do we provide for IHSS? We might provide information on sort of like your legal rights from IHSS. So, we can review documents and advise you on, what's the best approach for your case. We can assist with like preparing for an upcoming meeting or hearing with, your IHSS assessment person. We can assist in preparing documents. And, sometimes we represent people at administrative hearings, when they are appealing their IHSS decisions. But, we can't assist every single person who calls our office. So we try our best, but, we have to sort of make decisions based on, I think it's on the next slide, based on sort of the merits of the case and the ability of the clients to advocate for themselves and the availability of our resources or, other advocacy sources that, might be able to provide similar services that we do, just because, we, don't have the manpower or like infinite money to be able to just help everyone. But, we do our best to try to help as many people as we can that come to us. And we have, sort of different levels of assistance that might happen, based on your case. We might, give you information and maybe refer you to another legal service or other attorneys. If there's like a very specific issue that you have, we might provide technical assistance to sort of just figure out that one specific issue. We do evaluate and assess cases to see if it's appropriate for us to represent you. And, if we do evaluate that it is appropriate, then, we provide direct representation at, your IHSS hearing or other hearings sort of, and for any legal issues related to your disability. Okay, so that's sort of the presentation that I've got. I've sort of the overview of IHSS and the sort of process of, what your eligibility and sort of how to appeal if you disagree. But, I'll open it up to questions now. If any of you have questions, I'll just remind you that, try not to like give really specific details. Like if you have specific questions about your kid and you might want to, talk with me about it, please call our phone number so we can have a more in-depth chat about it. I just don't want people to sort of like reveal really personal information right now. But like if you want to talk about a specific case, like with your kid or yourself, feel free to give us a call so we can do an intake. But, any general questions are very welcome. And they can use this this chart to sort of determine, how many hours would be appropriate for, your kid or the person that's applying for IHSS. So, it's just like a bunch of different tasks, and we split it up by the service categories. So, we had the domestic services, and then, like the related services, and then the personal services, and like the paramedical services and things like that. So you split it up by like the category for each calendar thing. And then you just like fill in how much time it takes for you to do all of these things. So IHSS can see, okay, so this person is spending like, 10 hours a week, like cleaning their house. So like maybe we should give them 10 hours of IHSS service, right? So it's just like a very useful chart. So IHSS can see how much time you're spending so that they sort of know what's the appropriate amount of hours to be, allocating for your family. So that's that form, and I linked it in the chat. Let me pull up the chat again so I can see everyone else's questions. Okay, so the next question was, are forms available on the IHSS website? So if you're talking about sort of like the form, like the protective supervision form and stuff like that, yeah, I believe that there is, they are available on the IHSS website. There should be a page on the IHSS website that tells you how to apply. Let me see if I can find it so I can put it in the chat for you guys. So it says, yes, how to apply. So if you go to this link here, I don't know if you can save the chat later, or I'll just add these to the back end of the PowerPoint so you guys can all have these links. But this is like the page. If you go here at the very bottom, it tells you how to apply, and it has like some of the forms available, so you can see what you need to fill out to apply for IHSS. But everything that you would need to apply for IHSS should be on IHSS website.
If you also visit our website, www.dsala.org, and go to resources, and then you'll see frequently asked questions. This is one of the questions, and especially that form that you need for the doctor is also there. You can just download it, grab it, and it has a little just concise information also.
So the next question is, can a person who lives alone get IHSS for companions at night because she's scared to be alone? I'm not sure if that would be a service that would be provided. I mean, I think you can